Hello busy dads and busy people everywhere. If you want to work on the quality of your burpees, then this is a video that you will want to watch. Because in this video, I'm going to share 3 cues that I use in every single rep that I perform that I have found have helped me an enormous amount to maintain good burpee form, even in the context of being physically fatigued and exhausted. Before I jump into the 3 cues that I want to share with all of you, I want to talk a little bit about what a cue is and what makes a cue so useful. So a cue is a kind of micro protocol that you are going to follow at a certain juncture within a rep of a given movement. Cues are an absolutely essential part of lifting, powerlifting and Olympic lifting. What they do is they direct the lifter's attention to a specific part of the body to performing a specific movement within the rep. And if a cue is well thought out, executing on the cue will have a beneficial overall effect on the quality of the rep. Where cues become so helpful for the practitioner in weightlifting are when you are pushing towards a 1 rep max. When you're getting towards weights that you can't comfortably lift, it's very, very common for your form to degrade. And if you have 1 or 2 very, very clear, actionable instructions in your mind that you can focus on performing, it can be a way of squeezing out the rep with good quality, even when you're physically fatigued. So in the context of burpees, where we're not lifting weight so much as pushing hard into exhaustion, where the cues are going to be very, very helpful are, aside from first learning the movement and learning to perform it with good form just in isolation, it's going to be very, very helpful for when we're deep into a workout and when we're exhausted. Because when we're exhausted, it's very, very easy for our form to degrade. I've found, as someone who routinely pushes himself into a context of fatigue in my training, that having a handful of very, very clear cues that I can focus on is a really great way of helping me to push out good quality reps even when I'm completely exhausted. One of the cool things about cues is that very often a cue will send your attention to a part of the body that doesn't seem like it has very much to do with the lift or with the movement that you're working on. I'll give you 2 examples. My pull-up practice was revolutionized when I started really focusing on pointing my toes. No one thinks that the pull-up is a toe exercise, and yet paradoxically, sending your attention away from your upper back, away from your arms, right down to the tips of your toes, it can have a really beneficial effect on the overall quality of your rep. Another example, when I was deadlifting, it was a watershed moment for me when I learned to flex my lats properly at the top of the movement before I'd even put my hands on the bar. A cue that I was executing on before I'd even touched the bar, in a part of the body that you would think doesn't have much to do with the deadlift, had a massive, massive effect on the quality of the reps, and I was able to lift heavier weights, maintaining good form. So a cue will often send your attention to a part of the body that doesn't seem like it's directly relevant to the movement that you're performing. And all 3 of the burpee cues I'm going to share with you today have that paradoxical quality of sending your attention to a part of the body that doesn't seem like it's very important at that part of the movement. So let's jump right in. The first cue I want to share with you has to do with hand positioning, and specifically with finger positioning. Here's the cue. When you go into your rep, I want you to make sure that your fingers are apart and that your thumbs are pointing outwards. I don't want them pointing straight at each other, but I want them pointing at an angle of about, 20 degrees. Okay, so I want you to focus on thumbs pointing in the same direction as each other, pointing towards each other at an angle of about 30 degrees, and fingers wide, not wide, but open. And here's why. If you go into your rep with your hands closed, that is going to encourage you, to keep your elbows very close. And if you go down into your push with very close elbows, you're putting a disproportionate amount of the load on your triceps, which are a weaker muscle group than your shoulders or your chest. Whereas if you keep your hands open, that is going to incline you to flare your elbows very slightly. Not in an unsafe way like this, but just very slightly. And flaring your elbows very slightly is going to help you put the load back where it should be, distributed more evenly across the triceps, the shoulders, and the chest. If you want your burpees to focus your triceps, that's fine. You can still have your grip pretty close, but even if it's close, I want the hands open so that you will get that slight flare, which will put more of the work on the chest and the shoulders, sending it away from the triceps, which is where it would primarily be if you were keeping your hands closed like that. So that's my first cue. Every single rep, okay, when I'm repping out, when I'm exhausted, I do a visual on my hands. I'm making sure that I'm looking at my hands, and what I'm seeing is that my hand looks like that when I hit the ground. So that's your first cue that I want to give you. Focus on your finger positioning. Keep your fingers pretty open and keep your thumbs out. Now, the second cue I want to give you is, I think, the most important of all of the three cues I'm going to give you. And this is a cue that you're going to follow in the second count of the movement when you jump out into the plank position. This is going to be equally applicable to Navy SEALs and to 6 counts, and it's absolutely essential. I've really come to believe that getting this part of the movement right is what will make or break your burpee. So as you know, when we jump out into our second part of the position, we're jumping out into a plank position. And I see many burpee practitioners making one of two errors here. So when you jump out into plank position, okay, you're going to go into your push. And the push is a really, really crucial part of the movement. What I see is that people who don't set up for the push properly make one of two errors. One error is slumping your lower back. It's really, really important that we don't do this, because this is going to be dangerous for the back. Okay, so going into the movement like that, okay, this is a bad quality rep. You're not getting the kind of payoff that you should get for your upper body, because you're not going to hit depth like that. But more importantly, okay, you're putting your lower back at risk. So the first kind of error I see is slumping at the back like that. But there's a second kind of error I see, which is people raising their butt into the air higher than it should be so that their body isn't completely straight. So I'm seeing people going like this. It's very tempting to raise your back, because if you do, you're going to incline your chest towards the ground. That's going to make it easier to hit depth, okay? But you're not going to have to travel as far, and you're not going to get the same kind of core workout that you would if you maintain this strict plank position. So the question then becomes, how do you make sure that you maintain that strict plank position? And here's the cue I want to give you. When you jump out into the plank part of your position, into the second count, I want you to focus on doing two things. First of all, I want you to tense your quads. And second of all, I want you to squeeze your glutes. I want you to do those two things at the same time. You can stand up and practice doing them, okay? The effect of tensing your quads is it's going to open you up at the hips a bit. But while you're opening at the hips, you're also going to squeeze your glutes together and keep them super, super tight. That's my second cue. The reason for that cue is I've found that if I lock in my quads and my glutes, my body just can't really move much. I can't really raise my butt into the air because my quads are opening, pushing my butt towards the ground. But I can't really let it slump either because it's so tight. Instead of focusing on your core, focus on getting this part of the lower body locked in, and the core will follow. Once you're tensing your glutes and your quads, your core is going to fall into place. Whereas if you focus on tensing your core, you might have a nice hard core, but you can still keep your lower body loose, and that's what's going to lead to you not holding the correct position. If you do this cue, it's basically impossible not to keep good position in your push. So here I am in my push, I'm in count 2, I'm in the plank, I'm getting ready, and every single rep, especially when I'm tired, I've jumped out, I've done my visual, my hands are looking good. Now, in my mind, I say, activate glutes, activate quads. So I do that, and I push. And that activation is making it next to impossible for my back to slump or for my butt to go high into the air. So I find that more and more, when I'm deep in the suck, when I'm in no man's land in my workout, I'm going hard, I'm exhausted, I don't know how I'm going to get another 20, I'm really, really paying attention to these two cues. The third cue I want to share with you is a cue that I'm paying attention to in the final part of the movement. Early in the channel, especially when I would do sprints, a couple of people pointed out that I was not coming fully up between reps, and that was quite a valid criticism. I was doing the rep, and in count 6, I was still like that. Okay, so I was looking for a cue that would help me make sure that I would come standing fully erect at the end of the movement, because standing erect like that, it gives your glutes an extra bit of activation, it gives your legs, your quads some activation, it's good for your core. You're really shortchanging yourself if you don't come out of the movement properly. And what I found is the cue that I focus on is pulling my shoulder blades back. In the 6th count of the movement, I'm thinking of my shoulder blades meeting each other. I'm not focusing on my core, I'm not focusing on my legs. Instead, I'm focusing on bringing my shoulder blades back, and that has a knock-on effect. That forces my core and my legs to do what they're supposed to do. So at the top of every movement, I'm thinking like that. I'm visualizing my shoulder blades coming back together. And then I'm ready to go back in. So the 3 visuals I'm getting on my rep, when my hands hit the ground, I'm looking at the positioning. I always check it every single rep to make sure that the fingers are apart and the hands and the thumbs are going in that kind of angle where they're almost pointing at each other, they're just slightly open like that. Every single time in my mind, when I jump out into that plank position, I make a point of engaging my quads and my glutes. I think activate lower body, and I get them tight before I go into the push. This takes a microsecond, it's a quick movement, the rep, as I perform it, but still, I'm always paying attention. And then finally, when I come out of the rep, at the top, I'm focusing on bringing those shoulders together, and that makes it impossible not to stand up fully. These 3 cues structurally guarantee that the push will hit the right parts of the upper body, that you won't shortchange yourself by either lifting your butt or slumping your back, and that you'll stand up properly out of the rep. And so they make for beautiful reps. So I strongly recommend, if you are a practitioner of the 6 count, try out those 3 cues. And if in your own practice you have found yourself attending to certain things, you have cultivated certain cues, please share them in the comment section below. It would be wonderful to hear some of the other micro protocols that practitioners are following within the rep. The burpee is a simple movement, but it is very technical, and as a practitioner of the Busy Led program, you should really think of yourself as a student of this movement. So keep studying the movement, keep striving to make those reps better and better and better. It's really important that we maintain the formal integrity of our reps even deep into the suck. It's really important that we perform them safely, and I've found that these 3 cues have been very beneficial for me. So please let me know in the comment section if there are any cues that you're following, and I really hope that this will be helpful to many of you. Thanks very much. I will see you all very soon, my friends.